Back a couple months ago, I started these nightstands, and I sort of got sidetracked with the kitchen project, and finally the garden and everything outdoors, and kind of pushed it aside. Well, finally I'm getting around to getting back to it. It's just plain too hot to go outside, and inside in the air conditioning. My shop is about 65 degrees right now, so I'm getting back to work on it. You can see there that I made a plywood insert, zero clearance insert for the Amana blade. I just love that blade, and now I'm just going back and I'm starting to cut everything down to the final size for the project. One thing that I find handy to have around is a roll of this shrink wrap stuff. You get it at Home Depot for a couple bucks a roll, and it's good to keep stuff like, these are little scraps I'm going to use for garden stakes next year, but, it's easy to wrap them up with some plastic and just keep them together and throw them out in the garden stuff. So, anyhow, I'm just getting back to working on that, and now I'm just kind of using that miter set gauge there to set up this Craig gauge, and that's just been so handy, and I didn't realize just how handy it would be until I got into a project like this where there are just tons of duplicate cuts being made. So here I am, I've got all the drawer sides I'm going back through, and I'm trying to square them up now, and I cut the width right, and then I'm just going to go back and cut them all to length. When I started a couple months ago, I cut everything oversized to leave room till I had the exact dimensions figured out. And there you can see how nice that stop is on that Craig miter gauge. It just makes jobs like this with a lot of repeat stuff really super easy to do. And I must say that Amana 40 tooth blade that I bought is the best blade that I've ever owned. And there's the drawer sides all cut out. Now I'm going back, and I had cut the fronts and backs out oversized and just kind of left them to sit. And so I'm going to go back now and just do the final, run them over the joiner to make sure that they're dead flat, so I know I'm starting with good flat parts. And then I'm just going to go back and run them through the planer, bring them down to the final thickness. I must say that Wixie gauge that I put on the planer for the for setting the thickness and stuff like that, that's just been really a great thing to have, because I can set it right at 3/4 now, and the boards do come out at the 3/4 number exactly. So, and that's been a good addition. So anyhow, it's just a matter of running them through, and then I went back and I actually jointed one side straight parallel, and then going back and just cutting them to the final width here. And there you can see again how clean and smooth that Amana blade cuts. It cuts everything like butter and does a great job. So I got them pretty much all sized up now and ready to go. And each board actually has to be cut into 3 faces, because the drawers are all side by side in here, and you always want to cut them out of the same piece of wood. There you can see I'm cutting them out, and I'm actually going back and numbering them so that they stay together. Otherwise it looks kind of funky if you mix up the grain on drawers and stuff like that are in line. So I find it's always easiest to just make the boards a little bit oversized, and then when you go back and cut them, use cuts that are one after the next off the same board, and that way it'll really look pretty good when you get done. So here again you can see that I'm using that Craig miter gauge, and I did put some pieces of self-adhesive sandpaper on there to help stop things from sliding around and everything, and it's really working good now that I got the new one there and got it all set up. Then on the drawer backs, I originally was going to make them 3/4, but I decided to cut them back down to 1/2 inch. So that was an easy thing with the bandsaw. I took all the the pieces for that, and I just set up the bandsaw, and I resawed them. So I had a whole bunch of thin pieces left after that are about 190 thousandths thick that I normally would have just planed off and let it go to scrap. So the resawing capabilities of this saw really do work good. So I just, resawed all them, and then I went back and I, did a quick planing on them to get them perfectly smooth, and they're ready to be the drawer backs. Now there's all the fronts cut out, and there's the pieces for the backs now all ready to go. The all the rest of the carcass pieces are all oversized yet. They still have to be trimmed down, but it's time to switch over to the dado head now. Now, I originally thought about dovetailing all the drawers together for this, but then once I figured out I've got 18 drawers and each one has four sets of dovetails on it, stuff like that, I figured I'm just going to go back and cut all the joints using the dado jig and just kind of put them together the way I do with all the cabinet parts that I built upstairs. So, it's a real quick, easy way to do it. In this Infinity dado set actually does do does give me some wonderful, nice flat bottom square cuts and no tear out or anything. So that's pretty good. So I got that Delta tensioning jig, and I just have that all set up for my cutting the joints on the drawer fronts. And, it makes it real easy and safe to do with these smaller parts. You just lock them down and you just kind of push them through. But I did get a little tiny tear out because there's no way to put a backup piece under there. So after the first one, I went back and just took a block of wood and kind of just followed behind there to keep the top from tearing out. You can see, and that solves all the those issues. But it's really easy once you get set up. I've got 18 drawer fronts. Actually, I'm making 20 of them, so there's 2 cuts on each one, and it does take a little bit of time, but they all come out exactly the same with this jig with no problem. And then I had to go back and take the drawer backs. Either I had thinned these down, I decided to make them a 1/2 inch like the sides, and I'm cutting the same dado on there out of the edge of it just so that it'll lock into the drawer sides. And I did have to use that little backup strip too just to hold it. And then I just set up the drawer sides and had to cut a dado in each of them. And it had to be cut on both sides, and you can see it's really pretty easy once you get set up, and you just keep repeating it over and over again. And then I had to put a groove in the bottom of all of the pieces to accept the plywood for the bottom there. So this is just another one of those runs where I just set it up, and every one is cut the same distance from the bottom and the same depth. So it's really easy to just repeat that also. Now the plywood that I use for the bottom is just that underlayment from Home Depot, and it's only about 3/16 of an inch thick. So actually, in order to cut these grooves, I just used one of the 1/8 inch outside blades of the dado set, and then I put in a one of the 3/32 chipper blades, and it didn't chip out or anything. It actually did work good, and it cut an exact size slot. So, and then I just had to go back and trim off the little bit of excess under there, and you can see each cut the piece goes flying back. So I didn't want to stand behind there, so I kind of stood off to the side of the saw and just watched them fly out of the way there. So that's just to make clearance for the sides to go into the front. So there they are. All the fronts are cut, the backs are cut, and there's all the sides all cut, and basically ready to be sanded and go together. Then I had to cut the bottoms for the drawers, and this one amount of blade cuts it all pretty good. It cuts plywood real nice with no chip out or anything, and so that makes it a pretty easy job. I buy this stuff at Home Depot. It's real cheap for a sheet of it, and I usually just have them cut it into 4 pieces, so it's easy for me to handle and get down in my shop and stuff, and they don't charge you anything for the cut. So it's the easy way to bring it home. And then there you can see I'm using that Craig stop again just to cut all the bottoms the same. Yeah, making 18 of anything is time consuming, but you know, at least it's too hot outside to do anything else. So there it is. You know, it's kind of how they're going to go together. I just tried one out to make sure everything was gonna fit properly and the joints are gonna be good. And I started gluing them up. The first batch of them glued up there, and then you know I'll just do one in a second here for you. So basically I start with this glue up board that I made a long time ago that's got those square corners to get everything square, and it's got the those cam clamps and the other taper clamps to lock everything in. And I'm gonna first try to just assemble one of these here to make sure that everything goes together right. I did that with each one just to make sure there were no mess ups before I had glue on it. And everything just kind of, you know, locks together there like that, you can see. And then I just put it in that board, and you know, that'll clamp it square and hold everything together while I get the main clamps on it. So it's really a great thing to have to you know, to start your glue ups on and for frames and stuff like that. I've gotten a lot of use out of this little board. And all I did was copied the pattern off my CNC router table. So then I went back and, you know, just started putting glue on it. And for this project, I was really glad that I used a Titebond, because it did give me some time to play with things and shift things and stuff and get them aligned. You got like 15 minutes working time with it. So, you know, it was a good choice in glues. Got the little bit of extra wiped off, and then got that cam set and the other things locked in. So now the drawer is perfectly square, locked in that corner, and I can just go back and put the clamps on. That'll pull everything else tight, square, and squeeze the glue out and stuff. So that makes it a, you know, real easy job. The only thing is I'd leave each one in for about an hour to two to let it set up. So it did take me a couple of days till I was able to get everything all glued together. But there you can see how they go together, and you know, basically they're all glued up now and ready to go. You can see how the grain actually does match on each set of them there. So now it's time to start on the carcass, and I had the blanks all glued up previously, and I cut them down to the exact width, and now I'm just going back and squaring them up perfectly. My other miter gauge didn't do a good job at squaring everything up, and for this for everything to work out on this, everything has to be perfectly square. Nothing can be off at all. So I squared them up, and then set up the dado head for the thickness of the dividers that are going in there. And luckily Infinity gives you some really nice shims to put in there, so you can get a perfect fit of everything. It's really nice. And then I started putting the grooves in for the shelves for the actual drawers to go on. And this is where it got a little tricky. Everything you had to really carefully set it up and measure, because any mistakes here and everything would be scrapped. So you can see I've got a couple pushers. I'm actually trying to push down to make sure that there's no warp in anything. Keep it flat and put all the grooves in. In the end, I got all but one cut perfectly. And you can see there I measured once and cut twice on that one, but luckily it's in the bottom and it's going to be hidden, so it didn't turn out to be a problem. But that's what happens when you make, you know, one slight mismeasurement. So there it is. I got everything, you know, cut to size, and everything fit really perfect. There's how the drawers are going in now. I have to set up and mark the location of the vertical pieces that go in between them, the dividers. So first I got a rough number for the size of the dividers, and I decided to cut them all up. There were 12 of them required, so cut each one about 1/4 of an inch oversized in length right now to start. You can see how I had to glue up panels just to keep the grain going in the same direction, so there'd be no problems with expansion and contraction later. So there they are. I started putting the dados in the those shelves there, and same thing. I set these up, and this was really super critical to make sure everything's going to go together and work right. So I took my time, and you can see everything's symmetrical here, and it was all set up, I mean, within a couple thousandths of an inch, the way I double checked everything and went back and triple checked it. And using those, I got a couple more of those orange push blocks too that I like to use, because they really help you hold everything down flat, stuff like that. So I got those grooves in, and then there you can see I was telling you I just used one of the outside blades and one of the center things for the plywood groove, and I have to cut more grooves like that in the sides of the carcass. So I just thought I'd show you that, it actually did work. I was worried about not using two outer blades, but the groove came out perfect, no chipping, no tearing, and it's just perfect size for the plywood. So it did work. And there you can see the plywood fits just about perfectly. Just a little bit of shake, but. And now I got everything else trimmed up, and I'm just going back and cutting the sides to the exact length. You can see I'm just using that stop that I made that slides into the table saw fence there. So there it is. I got those shelves in. They're all cut, dadoed, and now it's time to cut the dividers to size, and I've got to sand them a little bit because I actually cut the dado grooves actually were about 2/1000ths under the thickness of the wood. I left a little bit so it still fit tight after sanding. So I'm just doing the first sanding there, and you can pretty much see once I got the right number for them, they fit really basically perfect. And the good thing is, in the end, it turned out that everything came out to be the exact same length. I didn't have to fiddle with any of the lengths or adjust them like I thought I was gonna. And it's pretty amazing how everything actually lined up when I got done. I couldn't have done it without that Craig jig and the actual grizzly saw there, and the good that Amana blade does just perfectly straight cuts. So there you can see I'm just going back and cutting the dividers for the second one now. And they actually all turned out to be identical to the first one, so it didn't matter if I mixed them up now. So there's, just kind of held together with some clamps, getting ready to go to the next stage of glue up. And there's that one mess up that I made, and I will go back later and fill that in with a piece, and there's trim that goes down there. So luckily it came in a spot that you won't see, so somebody up there was watching over me. And I've been doing a lot of sanding and stuff. You can see how that furnace filter, I just use those furnace filters with the fan, get plugged up, and they're just cheap filters. You get 3 packs at Home Depot, and it takes 2 seconds to change them, and actually they catch a good amount of the sanding when you do sand. So now we're doing the glue up, and I decided to run this a little fast because otherwise it's like a 10-minute scene itself. So you can see everything just kind of fits together perfectly, and I'm just putting some glue in one side and just kind of spreading it out so it hits the edges there and stuff, and going one step at a time. And this is where the Titebond 3 really does excel. It gives you at least 15, maybe even 20 minutes of time where you can still move the joints and slide them around a little bit, and you can still pull them together and squeeze out the extra glue. And I guess I've never done a glue up quite this big before with this many joints that have to line up and stuff like that. And this is when you really realize you need a slow setting glue. So I got all the dividers and shelves all set up and made sure that they were really perfect when they went together, and just had to clamp that assembly down a little bit to pull all the glue joints perfectly tight and squeeze out all the extra glue. And then it was time to apply glue to the side carcass pieces there, and same thing, I just put it in there, and if you notice here, you'll see how easily everything fit together. I just couldn't believe it. It just slid together perfect. those cuts were just so precision, and they were just so aligned, which I never expected. I was expecting to have a bunch of trouble at this point in time, but luckily I didn't, and taking my time and measuring good really did pay off. I've never glued this many pieces together at once, so this is kind of an adventure for me. So there you can see everything just kind of slipped together, and it just pulled itself perfectly square together too, with all those joints and everything. They just when I put a square on it, after everything was clamped up, it was just perfect. So this is the point in time where you never have enough clamps. You start using every clamp that you have in the shop. You need different lengths and stuff like that, and so there it is. Everything's clamped together. I wiped their little glue that I had to wipe out. You can see there's some marks from a wet paper towel and stuff, but basically that went really, really smooth. I was surprised about that, and everything just fit perfect. So I let that one sit overnight actually and dry, and then next morning, next one's ready to be glued up. Same thing. Went together perfect, no problem. So I'm real happy about that, and I just left that clamped up for a couple hours when I got that one done. Yeah, that was one part of the job I was really fretting about, but in the end it wound up going really easy, and there you can see basically what they're going to look like. Now I need to cut the plywood for the backs of them, and back over to the grizzly saw, and the amount of blades, just cuts nice. And there you can see where that plastic table I put on the front of the saw really helps for cutting the wider pieces. That's like a 19-inch wide or 20-inch wide piece there, and with that extension on there, no problem cutting it square. So first one I put in, and I didn't wipe the excess glue that had squeezed out of the ends of those other pockets, so it was a little bit tough to get in, and I wound up having to hit it a couple times with a hammer, and then I just went back and threw a couple 3/4 of an inch 18 gauge staples in it, and there you can see the second one. I cleaned out the glue before sliding it in, and it just fit perfect. And same thing, a couple of the 18 gauge staples in there just to hold everything in place. So pretty much that finishes up the carcasses for these nightstands, and now it's time to go back, and I'm just doing a rough sanding here with 80 grit to get all my pencil marks off, and there are all the markings I put on there for cut locations and stuff like that. And I got to take the belt sander to the top there. There was just like about less than a 64th of an inch of misalignment on the top there that I had to sand off, and that was really easy to do. And last thing to do is add a couple pieces of walnut accent trim that go down on the bottom where I showed you I had cut that notch wrong. And again, this is walnut from my backyard that I'm just going through and flattening it on the joiner first, as always, and then I'm gonna run it through the planer and get it to the right thickness. And there again, you can see that Wixie gauge is really handy to. I want something 3/4 of an inch. That's just where I crank it to, and it comes out perfect. That really is a big time saver. So I got that pretty much cut up. Now you can see the mess that I have in my shop. You can hardly walk in here. It's a couple days down here, and with no cleanup time, and it's just a big mess. So here I am getting back to making those pieces of trim, and had to just cut some chamfers on them to match everything else. And I just like to use a square piece of plywood as a backup instead of using a miter gauge or anything like that on the router table. And I just had to route some edges on them, and then I went back and put the dado set on there, and took about a 64th of an inch dado off the edge just to overlap on that bottom piece, just to make sure I had that part covered. And then I just cut the steps and the two ends of it while I was at it. These strips are just to tie it in a little bit better with the headboard too. So there you can see they go right down to the bottom there, and there's that plug I put in to cover that up. But now you can see this is just gonna hide this, and it goes up about a 64th of an inch over the bottom thing there, and I glued that in place, and you know, it's just a matter of waiting for the glue to dry now. And there's the other one there too. So there they are. I figured I'm going to stop the video at this point because it's just getting too long, and you know, this is the point I'm at now. So there's the drawers. I still have to make knobs. I still have to do final sanding. I still have a lot of sanding work on the drawers and fitting and UHMW slides and stuff like that. So I just thought I'd, you know, stop it here, and I'll be making another video probably another couple weeks, and doing the final work and finishing this up. But there you can see, you know, there's basically what the carcasses are going to look like, and there's also motion activated lights going to go underneath it and stuff like that. So you know, it'll be a while till I do get them all finished. And here's a link to the original video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.